There are so many projects in the Coachella Valley and the Eastern Coachella Valley that get support under the name of bringing economic development. I can mention several examples. The expansion of the jail that happened in Indio, right? That got support because it was going to bring economic development. And under the very traditional definition of economic development is it was going to create jobs. In my definition, and maybe in the definition of solidarity economics, right? I mean, the job piece is one piece of economic development. What projects like this have failed to do is to think about whether they are positive for our communities, whether they are responding and creating opportunities for our community members. It's sort of like we skip that step because when you live in communities that have a history of being poor, right? Have a history of low-paying jobs, it seems like this is better than nothing.
The World Logistics Center, right? That's not that far from us here in San Bernardino area, where you have, I don't know, hundreds of square foot of just warehouses. You have so many warehouses just back to back to back to back. That project isn't serving anyone. It's not serving community. It's not serving the electeds. It's not serving even the developers at this point. Just empty space of concrete walls that don't have any use for us. It's a place that's causing pollution, taking up land. It actually brings down the value of homes nearby. And it's sad, where families have to drive miles to the local grocery store, but can maybe step outside and see a warehouse. I know that there was a lot of community input on, for example, the Victoria Gardens project. It's outdoors, lots of shops, eateries, even local condos, townhouses, apartments nearby where people can walk. They also have a cultural center. So families can go on any given day and visit this giant library, this giant cultural center. In that sense, that project was kind of tailored to the needs of the community.
In the United States, neighborhood development has historically focused on buildings, roads, and storefronts rather than on people. Because of this, place-based economic development has come to be associated with aggressive efforts to clean up neighborhoods, which usually means pushing out or isolating people of color, low income, and indigenous communities. These approaches have caused massive amounts of displacement, worsening poverty, and racial inequality. Many of our communities still contend with the long-term impacts of decades of racist, narrowly focused development programs implemented throughout this country's history. Solidarity economics offers an opportunity to challenge and change the beliefs and practices of these traditional approaches. While traditional approaches often focus solely on the physical environment, blighted buildings, roads, vacant lots, a solidarity economics approach focuses on people and starts with the experiences, needs, stories, and connections that already exist in the community. It starts from community organizing efforts and continues to build and strengthen social infrastructure, not just the physical infrastructure. A traditional approach uses a deficit frame. It sees people living in disinvested communities as problems to be solved instead of partners in the work of transformation. Solidarity economics recognizes that all communities have networks, culture, and people power, all resources that can be leveraged to make sustainable change. Not only that, because it's rooted in a deficit approach, traditional economic development assumes that improving neighborhoods requires bringing investment into communities from the outside. These developers try to lure businesses into poorer communities, attracting them with promise of turning a profit. We know how that story ends for our communities. In contrast, economic development rooted in solidarity economics looks inside communities for resources and harnesses these assets within local communities and across regions. As you'll hear from some of the stories in this video, this means investing in local entrepreneurs, nonprofit organizations, and small businesses, engaging resident volunteer energy for neighborhood improvement projects, and leveraging the culture and interdependence that exists in all communities. If investment does need to come from the outside, people-focused development uses strategies to make sure that local residents have the ability to direct change coming to their neighborhood, like a legally enforceable community benefits agreement. CBAs are an important tool for maintaining community control, but there are other options too. In traditional economic development, ownership of and profit from projects go almost exclusively to developers. Projects rooted in solidarity economics look at models that spread ownership and profit more broadly. Thanks to organizers and activists in communities, we are seeing a rise of community land trusts, cooperative housing, community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, community development corporations, or CDCs, and other community accountable institutions. These movements are growing stronger, and collectively, they are shifting the tide towards economic development practices that prioritize community leadership and shared profit.
So our organization was founded by Dr. Denise Fairchild back in 1996. So we like to use this phrase called, we want better neighborhoods, but we want same neighbors. And so that's really the driving passion and the force behind the work that we do, which is really that those most affected by this legacy of racism in Los Angeles should be at the forefront of the change that they want to see, not only for themselves, but for their families and the next generations to come. We're building a new generation of entrepreneurship, but we've also been challenged by the economics of corridors that have transformed, where you see a lot of displacement of small businesses, an erasure of the Black population happening systemically when people do not have access to the kind of capital you need to start a business.
As the CD Tech example illustrates so well, a solidarity economics approach to community economic development focuses on harnessing the power, creativity, and resources of local communities towards neighborhood revitalization. Solidarity economics recognizes that neighborhoods are made up of complex and functional networks, and that those networks are connected to the larger networks of the cities, counties, and regions around them. When those connections are surfaced and strengthened, everyone benefits.
All our education program is place-based, so we actually take the work into the community because it comes from the community to really see projects evolve and develop. So we believe the nonprofit sector is a means by which you can invest in people, invest in neighborhoods, and really change the kind of the infrastructure of communities to the workforce and economic development side of the nonprofit sector, and help strengthen and support small business entrepreneurship. Focus on infrastructure building and supporting the South LA area in terms of making sure that nonprofits are at the table when big initiatives like SURF or other initiatives that are coming down the pike are able to identify what they care about, what they need, and how they can feel ownership in these processes and get access to these dollars, and help strengthen the infrastructure of the area in terms of the nonprofits, but making sure that they get the resources that they need to not only be better advocates at the local, city, state, and county level, but also in terms of making sure that they're able to apply for bigger dollars by making sure they're strengthening their internal programming, their internal administrative and management process.
Over the last several decades, communities have organized and developed new strategies that recognize the importance of harnessing the power within networks that exist within communities and strengthening those connections between communities across regions. Key to this growing community development movement has been the creation of community development corporations, or CDCs. These nonprofit, place-based organizations have become critical mechanisms through which communities make the kind of changes they want to see in their neighborhoods, including affordable housing, jobs, green space, and other improvements.
So CDCs are very important to communities that are disinvested. I think more so now than any other time, we're witnessing that. Since our inception, the idea was we're making sure to address issues that as a county we weren't addressing: housing, economic opportunity, language barriers, issues around immigrant and refugees. So for us in our community, if a CDC wasn't there, we're talking about 100,000 people who wouldn't have a voice or wouldn't have a pathway to advocate for their economic opportunity, to advocate for language access, to advocate for economic mobility. The organization came to be in 1981, so we've been around a little over 40 years, based solely on advocacy. We're a community of about 100,000 residents, immigrant refugees. In 1981, the city and Caltrans wanted to run a highway through the community. The community stood up, did not want the highway to cut through the community, and essentially divided in two. We were the organization to stand up, mobilize the community, and fight against it. Though the highway still was created, we were able to get a freeway-covered park, the only freeway-covered park in the state of California. And since then, we've taken on advocacy and policy work and system change work since our inception. We are an economic development organization. We realize that there are a lot of community-based organizations that don't have the background in economic development, nor are even brought to the table. So the fact that we've been around 40 years talking about opportunities in our community, advocating for those communities. We speak about 12 languages in our organization, so we make sure that we're representing our organization. I think it's powerful to have the community represented in the way that we continue to represent in 40 years. I grew up in City Heights, so to come back and be the executive director was kind of a cherry on the top of we believe representation matters. We also employ 75% of our community. We want to be able to represent the community in the best way possible. They guide that, whether it's representation on our board, representation in our programming, representation in our policies that we help create or react to. There's definitely a significant amount of our community playing a role in all of our operations.
The Vietnamese community inspired me through their struggle. They have a dream of opening up a business, a restaurant, a nail shop. They have a dream, but they don't know how to get to it. They don't know how to get to the resource, the technical assistant, how to market their business. And I felt like that's what I was needed. I help with customary one-on-one business plan, get permits, license, resource to grant loans to storefronts on storefront improvement, technical assistance in terms of marketing, even a business plan and how to get customers. We give them a map. They had an idea, and we draw a map with them and draw them stages where they can, where to start and how to start and where to go. We match their needs to the resource.
The City Heights CDC and CD Tech are just two examples of how local communities are organizing themselves to make an impact within their neighborhoods. But we need to go even further to make sure that those communities are connected to each other and to the economic opportunities in the cities, regions, and states where they are located.
Because San Bernardino is a place where we have been hit many times in different ways. We are just coming out of a bankruptcy. It is where most of our logistics movement is happening. It's also a very impoverished city. And on top of that, we don't have a consistent government that fully advocates for our community all the time. We actually have seen the opposite of that, where it's lack of resource, lack of engagement, lack of authentic community engagement. Currently, what Just San Bernardino has come up and said an inclusive economy means acquiring land. An inclusive economy means a community benefits agreement that can actually be legally binding in development of our city. And purposeful pathways that can actually lead to careers, to good paying career jobs, not just logistics jobs, but careers that can actually take us places and that can make our community sustainable provide us skills for sustainability. And also partnership, collaboration. Some of our biggest values is making sure that our people first, right? People above money, people above developers, people above the gentrification, right? And I think that's part of it too. It's trying to understand how can we build on people power to really sustain our community and make sure that as the development is coming, development is going to happen in our city, in our community. How do we make sure that we have acquired the right skill sets, understanding, knowledge, and how have we created base building in our own community to really build on people power? We should be engaging our community first. How do we know that we need a community benefits agreement if our community doesn't even understand what a community benefits agreement is, right? There needs to be involvement. That's why it's from the bottom up. How can we actually expand on some of the things that are already happening in our community? We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to understand what our community needs and how we can move on those needs to support our community. And that's why